Last year, I asked a question on Twitter about the Grunty's Furnace Fun minigame at the end of Banjo-Kazooie, and whether or not the gaming community found it to be good or bad. The responses were varied, but the general consensus was a surprising, it was bad. From friends and followers alike, there was a lot of teardown toward this strange but unique endgame quiz. It was kind of shocking to me because, as a longtime fan of Banjo-Kazooie, I always found it to be a fitting and entertaining way to end a retro classic, one that echoed the game's humor and charisma. The negativity toward this minigame was surprising to me, to say the least, so to fully understand things, I figured that I'd do what I do best: overanalyze video game design in a YouTube video. Today's video is a deep dive into the penultimate challenge of Banjo-Kazooie, Grunty's Furnace Fun, a way to examine its successes, failures, and most importantly, the logic behind its design goals. For those not in the know, Grunty's Furnace Fun appears before the game's final boss battle, acting as a quiz show. With the main duo navigating a giant game board, Gruntilda herself hosts the show, tossing out timed trivia questions on different aspects of the game the player just experienced. From close-up shots on level environments, the mumble-speak voices of the cast, to even Gruntilda's own everyday life, the board game is a final test on the entire game's collective of content. There are occasional retreads of challenges from the main game, but a majority of your time in Grunty's Furnace Fun will be tackling the game's avalanche of facts, inching your way to the climactic tussle atop Grunty's tower. Let's address the elephant in the room first. As comical and cartoonish as this idea is, a pop quiz at the end of the game already raises some red flags when it comes to pacing. After completing level after level to collect objects, it does seem like a spontaneous roadblock that bars progress in a way that doesn't serve the game's mechanical goals. For a game focused on platforming and item gathering, Furnace Fun challenges the player's memory and observation skills more than anything else. Yes, there are repeats of some minigames and boss fights where platforming can be a factor, but Furnace Fun doesn't tie its main source of struggle into its platforming elements. But when parallel to the game's other core element, exploration, it's easy to see where Grunty's Furnace Fun succeeds. The game is chock full of memorable set pieces, and the collectible hunting sides well with exploratory gameplay. By peppering each stage with lots and lots of collectibles, it's encouraged to scour every nook and cranny to associate the player with the stage itself. The more challenging second half also gives reason to revisit levels, as the player might lose a few lives in order to collect everything they need to reach Furnace Fun in the first place. In any other game, this might sound self-defeating, but Furnace Fun isn't as distant from Banjo-Kazooie's investigative design direction as you might think. It's a game that encourages, wants the player to explore everywhere. With that in mind, being reminded about these set pieces and locations via trivia questions isn't short-sighted by any stretch. It's a nice, challenging way to reminisce about the adventure that's now behind us. In addition, Rare have always had a sense of humor, and Grunty's Furnace Fun does demonstrate that humor in a utilitarian way. It's one thing to have self-referential facts sporadically across a world, but building an entire challenge around that awareness is a neat way to cap off the journey and provide a panoramic view of everything the game has offered thus far. And this is all coming from a villain as charismatic and outright egotistical as Gruntilda. For someone who's been causing such irritation as you explore, having the witch herself host a self-aggrandizing quiz show stays true to the world building that Rare were pursuing, with her own vanity being what kicked off the journey in the first place, along with the persistent hub world being her own lair, verbal jabs and all. Having her at the host's podium is a sensible and frankly hilarious decision. Still, in closer examination, Grunty's Furnace Fun's motive being a way to look back on Banjo and Kazooie's journey isn't executed very well, and to my own self-awareness, the nostalgia goggles need to come off. Furnace Fun has good intentions, and the concept itself isn't flawed from the start, but it makes a pretty big assumption about the player right out of the gate. An assumption that many players likely didn't align with. You would have to be an extremely patient and observant player to internalize these locations, sound bites, and factoids, all while having the foresight that these facts would be part of a grander set piece at the game's end. The attentiveness demanded from the player to understand everything about the game's world isn't charitable, and because of this, it's a challenge that really isn't enjoyable without multiple playthroughs. Unless you have a strategy guide or walkthrough, it's not a sequence that's intuitive the first time around. Under this mindset, Grunty's Furnace Fun is a bit of an ego stroke. If you're cynical, you might even say that it's the developers patting themselves on the back and nothing more. But I will give credit to the game's writers, who contribute entertaining dialogue from Gruntilda throughout this lengthy sequence. However, one of the biggest criticisms that Grunty's Furnace Fun raises is something that's introduced long before the actual board game even occurs, and I think we all know what that is. Brentilda's initial appearance in Gruntilda's lair is very strange, distributing facts about her sister's nasty routines. Her introduction to Banjo-Kazooie's framework may come across as pointless set dressing at first, but it turns out that the facts about Gruntilda that Brentilda relays to the player actually serve a larger meaning. The Gruntilda spaces on the Furnace Fun board lead to questions about the villain's disgusting habits, which can feel like a cheap shot, considering it's never entirely clear of what Brentilda's purpose is. Her appearances start in plain sight, but over time you have to actively seek her out in harder-to-find locations, all without any indication of why she's in Gruntilda's lair in the first place. While I can understand providing context towards Gruntilda's family as a way to flesh the villain out as a character, the way Brentilda is implemented doesn't really do much when the Furnace Fun game comes into play. Even if you memorize the facts she states, there's a vast time difference in Banjo-Kazooie between Brentilda's first appearance and the part where these facts are actually utilized. If there was an explicit reward to finding her in each place she's hidden, like a secret bonus or even just an extra life, then there would be more of a drive to seek her out. But even if that wasn't the case, you could simply experience a gradual revealing of the fact's true purpose the more you found Brentilda. Maybe she could drop more and more hints about what that fiery fate is each time you find her. There are many ways that Rare could have used Brentilda in a more ergonomic fashion so that the Furnace Fun wouldn't seem like such an unpleasant surprise, but Brentilda's appearances are only half of the issue regarding Grunty's personal indecencies. You can skip Gruntilda spaces with a collectible Joker card, but even if you make the effort to avoid any Grunty spaces while collecting Jokers, Skull spaces randomly ask questions from all space pools, so there's still a chance to get a Grunty fact question if you happen to land on those. Really, there's a strong chance that you'll have to confront this issue during the duration of the quiz show. The game definitely pushes the player to these questions, even if the player does everything in their power to avoid them. Gruntilda questions would have likely been better received if they provided a bonus rather than integrated questions to progress, because unlike the spaces for visual, audio, or content clues, the Grunty facts don't tie themselves to the stages you explore. While flying around Freeze's Peak Snowman or climbing up the church in Mad Monster Mansion can associate the player with the levels, that can't be said for a random gross-out tidbit that you find scattered around Gruntilda's lair. They aren't tied to the actual gameplay, or even the levels themselves, so they feel all the more spontaneous and auxiliary in practice. With all this in mind, Grunty's Furnace Fun is a cunning trick for Rare to pull. It really is a pop quiz, and if that was Rare's cognitive intent, then they certainly achieved it. A first-time player will experience the same stress and anxiety that you would for any random knowledge test, but veteran players who've done the studying will be able to appreciate its humorous and referential intentions better. That's extremely important to note because as someone who's played this game so many times, I can't go back to a time when this really felt like a pop quiz. Studying Grunty's Furnace Fun actually weakens the game's spontaneity and perhaps even makes it more of a success than it deserves to be. That concept of being able to play the game for the first time again has come up a lot in games criticism on YouTube as of late. When you see the twist coming, it doesn't hit nearly as hard. If you're feeling dramatic, you might say that knowledge is damaging to the artistry itself, but I'll save that discussion for another day. The actual gameplay utility of Grunty's Furnace Fun is constantly at odds with its creative ideology, but it's performed in a remarkably characteristic way. This is a villain in her element, self-aggrandizing and vain in every sense, putting the hammer down on the titular duo without giving them any room to breathe. It's hard to really fault Rare for giving this kind of idea so much polish, as they've experimented with the same idea in their past work. But when looking at Grunty's Furnace Fun under a microscope, it's an ultimately misdirected attempt to get the player to look back on the long journey they've experienced. While there are fond memories worth revisiting, this strange penultimate challenge is more gun to the head than anything, and that pressure is inconvenient at best and a total stopping point at worst. The creativity that was clearly put into this segment is washed away by a sense of anxiety and confusion. In a moment where the player is totally prepped to take on Gruntilda, someone who's been causing all kinds of trouble over the game's runtime, having a long, drawn-out test of memory standing in your path is bound to ruffle some feathers. For what it's worth, Grunty's Furnace Fun is creative, and it shows that Rare were willing to try something a bit more nuanced for the final stretch of their iconic game. It's easy to appreciate developers with that kind of alternative thinking, even when the end product has its clear and present faults. So even when the character parade rolls on and 2D is saved, it's pretty easy to appreciate this strange little detour. Now what are you waiting for? Go kick Grunty's ass.